I'm Shaun Haney, and this is RealAg on the Weekend. Let's get real and get connected with the week that was in Canadian agriculture. RealAg on the Weekend starts now. Welcome, everybody, to RealAg on the Weekend here on 650 CKOM and 980 CJME. I'm your host, Shaun Haney of RealAgriculture.com. I hope you had yourself a great week. And as I always say, hopefully you got the things done you needed to. And weather. Hey, speaking of weather, we're going to hear from Drew Lerner from World Weather Inc. today on the program. I had a chance to catch up with him when I was down in Kansas City at the Top Producer Summit. We're also going to hear from Michelle Payn. She was a speaker at the Crossroads Conference that happened in late January in Edmonton. She talked about authentic stories speak volumes for farmers as they try to tell their story more and more. We're also going to hear from Ian Epp of the Canola Council of Canada talking about lambda-cy being back on the market. That's going to please some farmers. And we'll also have some commentary from Josh Linville of StoneX on fertilizer prices. So there's a lot to cover here. Indeed. If you have any feedback on today's program, we'd love to hear from you. Send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also find Real Agriculture across all the different social media platforms. I've been trying to post on our Instagram account, kind of behind-the-scenes stuff as much as I possibly can. And, of course, we're on Twitter and YouTube and TikTok and basically all of Threads, all of them. Oh, hey, the other option is called the RealAg Feedback Line, 855-776-6147. This week I was down in Kansas City, Missouri. Cold. It was cold. I was at the Top Producer Summit. Some really progressive, large commercial growers from across the United States in attendance. Really great conference. First time there. Truly enjoyed it. I'm definitely going back. Actually, a couple of years ago, Christian Hebert of Saskatchewan, Moosomin, was the honoree that he won the Top Producer Award. So big shout out to Christian. I think he's the first Canadian to ever get that award, and the only Canadian to get that award. So well done, Christian Hebert. This year's winner was Mark Anersh from Colorado, who listens, who's a big fan of Real Agriculture, by the way. Had a great chance to visit with him and talk. We actually had talked on the phone a number of years ago. He reminded me of that, which was very cool as well. A lot of talk about tariffs, a lot of talk about trade. I gave a concurrent session where we talked about some of the political issues of the day, of course. Talked a lot about U.S. ag policy. At the same time, we talked a lot about what's happening in Canada. We got government prorogued, what that means. When are we going to have an election in Canada? There's a lot of interest in what is happening in Canada, besides some of the lame jokes, we'll say, when it comes to the 51st state and things like that. But there is a lot of interest in politically what is happening in Canada right now. And will we see the Conservatives win the next election? Is there still hope for the Liberals, a chance, and a whole bunch of stuff like that? It was great. And also, we had I was on a panel. That was really fun. That was the breakfast session on Wednesday. And I was on the panel with Ken Zuckerberg, who is the head of research for He's the global head of research with CHS out of New Jersey or New York. And it was really good time. Ken and I covered a lot of bases, a lot of ground, and really great opportunity to be able to participate in that event and kind of tell Canada's story a little bit, because right now Canada's story needs to be told. There's a lot of misconceptions, what's happening at our border, or what is happening versus what's not happening, and Canada's position on things like tariffs, and how does Canada respond longer term, and where we go from here, and things like that. So it's a good opportunity to tell Canada's story on the country's behalf, and yeah, I described it to somebody this week because we do a lot of stuff, media appearances in the U.S. and things like that. Get a chance to speak to farmer audiences across the U.S. as well as Canada, which I really appreciate. I just absolutely love as a part of my job. Spend a lot of time these days explaining Canada to Americans and explaining America to Canadians. I kind of feel that is sort of my wheelhouse at this point. If only we could bring the two sides together. It was interesting. I had a great discussion with Greg Dowd. Now, Greg is now the president and CEO of the National Milk Producers Federation, a group that represents dairy farmers in the United States. But The cool thing is he was the chief ag negotiator for President Trump and Bob Lighthizer in the first Trump administration. And Greg also farms in Kansas. And so it was great. I had a great chat with him, and a great chance to kind of catch up, so to speak. And of course, when somebody like that talks about what's going on from a trade perspective, you need to listen, because that dude's been in the room. So when the U.S. was negotiating the Phase 1 deal, he was in the room. He was in the room with the Chinese officials. So he knows what he's talking. It's sort of like when we get a chance to interview former Canadian trade negotiator Steve Verhoeven. Such knowledge. And this is the guy that sat across the table from Bob Lighthizer negotiating that USMCA deal. Those are the coolest kind of conversations and interviews. I have to kind of connect some dots and provide put conversations together, and here's what I think, here's what I'm going to assume, and here's what I see as I connect all these tea leaves, so to speak. Someone like Greg Dowd or Steve Verhoeven, it's like, yeah, no, this is what was said, right? And he told me some great off-the-record stories of that whole USMCA negotiation, which I did appreciate. We had some good laughs. It was a fun week. I had a great weekend, and chatting with so many farmers with so many of the same issues and so many of the same concerns as farmers from Saskatchewan. You might as well have been in a meeting in Saskatoon. I'll be really honest with you. Indeed. Well, hey, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to hear from Drew Lerner. He is from Kansas City. He's got a ton of subscribers for his weather advisory service in Saskatchewan. The dude is a Saskatchewan legend. He's going to join us to talk about the forecast for the Western Canadian prairies as well as the rest of North America when we come back. You're listening to RealAg on the Weekend, 650 CKOM and 980 CGME. If you're serious about agriculture, RealAg's got you covered.
For over 10 years, we've listened to and shared what producers have to say about everything from policy to agronomy from coast to coast.
Keep up with the latest in Canadian agriculture at RealAgriculture.com through daily newsletters, and check out our YouTube channel.
Thanks for joining us in the RealAg community as we continue to cover and serve North American agriculture.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today.
No, I'm never secret about the fact that I dislike the cold. It has been rough as of late. Man, across a very wide geography. I was in Kansas City, Missouri this week for the top producer. It was cold, like I said. And, it's a wide, I was in a rental car line earlier this week, and there was two guys from Florida. We were talking about how much snow has been in Florida. And at Top Producer Summit, there's a couple different weather forecasts. One was with Eric Snodgrass. The other one was with Saskatchewan, very famous, and he gets a lot of love in Saskatchewan. It is Drew Lerner of World Weather Inc. He is based out of Kansas City, Missouri. And I had a chance to interview Drew. I ran into him at the meeting, and here's our conversation providing a North American weather forecast for 2025. And we're joined by longtime friend of Real Agriculture and a local here in Kansas City. That's it is Drew Lerner. Drew, how are we doing?
I'm good. It's good to have you on my turf for a change.
That is very correct. The weather, man. First of all, locally here, it's been cold in Missouri. What is going on?
Yeah, I was up in Canada a week ago, and I think it all came with me.
It's your fault.
Yeah, it was, minus 31, and I was in Edmonton.
Yeah.
And it was very cold. But, all this is coming from up your way, and for this part of the world, they don't like it,
No.
And here we've got more moisture in the air, so when we get cold in this part of the world, it hurts a little bit more. I love your cold. I hate this cold.
I've got two sons that are in North Dakota going to school, and it was minus 38 yesterday, which, of course, at minus 40, that's where Fahrenheit and Celsius connect.
That's right.
It's cold either country when it's that cold.
That's right.
I guess you look at the overall North American weather pattern heading into spring here.
Yeah.
Optimistic, concerned, just kind of give us the lowdown here.
It really depends on where we are talking about. I'm very excited about Canada this year, at least in the southwestern prairies. I think we're at the end of the 8-year drought, and we're going to get some break. Now, we'll go back and forth a little bit this year, but I think it's going to get better up there. It's going to get better in the northern plains for a little while as well, probably in the spring. I don't know that we can take it all the way through the summer, but nonetheless, better situation for those guys. In the U.S., here in the central part of the country, there's a potential we might get a little dry a little later in the year. We're not doing real well on moisture in this part of the world right now.
Yeah.
And that cold air that comes in from Canada, there's no moisture up there, up your way. So when it comes down to this part of the world, it doesn't bring any moisture. So places like Iowa and Minnesota and Nebraska and neighboring areas are really running a little short on moisture. And there's still a drought prevailing in some of those areas. The longer we keep the northwesterly flow going, the higher the potential is that we're going to come into spring dry in some of these areas. My concern is once the cold air runs out, Mother Nature will switch it around and we'll get really warm. And if there's not a good transitional period there, we could go into warm and dry instead of cold and dry.
A lot of ranchers on the western half of the U.S. What do you see on that side of the country?
Yeah, I think that from a ranching perspective, most of the situation right now is a little tenuous. I think there's been a lot of yakety-yak about the La Nina and negative PDO and it being dry out there. And but we got to keep in mind that it did rain fairly well in November last year, and so there's moisture down deep in the ground. We just need a 1 or 2 storm system to come across the area, moisten up that topsoil, and we're going to end up with much better grazing conditions. But that's the big concern. That northwest flow isn't going to help generate that very well.
Northeast and, I should say central and eastern Canada. What's your, early prognosis there?
A lot of cold still yet to come.
Really?
Yes.
Because they've had a lot of snow, Drew.
Yeah, I know. Ontario, Quebec, I think it's going to be kind of a challenging spring. A lot of cold air coming at times. We'll warm up and then we'll get cold again. I'm afraid we may get some false starts on some of the crop.
Ooh, that could be chilly. That could be chilly for corn.
It could be chilly for corn. It'd be a little delay in planting. It could also hurt some of the wheat crop if it gets going a little bit too soon. So I'm a little concerned about that part of Canada. For the prairies, I think prairies it's going to be a good mix. There is a potential for some dryness in the eastern part of the area.
So when I've talked to some other people that are providing weather forecasts, I'm sorry I cheated on you.
I'm hurt. I'm really hurt.
One of the things that I have heard, I'm curious on whether you agree with it or not, is Western Canada will have moisture early, but concerned about an early shutoff, earlier than last year, potentially. Do you see it differently?
It could be that way, but I don't think so. I think it'll be similar to last year. We will do well in the spring. We will be wetter than we were last year in the spring in parts of the region.
Prairies will take that.
Yeah, I know they can. Especially the area that I think will be wettest is going to be the area that's been driest. So they'll absorb that and really do well with it. But there could be a little bit of planting delay, and so that may get some people a little bit worked up. But yeah, I do think there's a potential for some dryness later in the year. Right now, the way it looks to me, the northeast half of Saskatchewan and Manitoba probably have the biggest risk of being a little dry bias as we get into the heart of summer. A lot depends on what happens to the dryness in the states. Because if we end up with a dry spring here, the conditions in the atmosphere are going to support ridge building, and it may end up being more in the middle of North America because of that dry bias, and so that could work its way up and hit eastern parts of the prairies.
So when we have ridge building, is that a situation where it locks in the condition, or what happens when you say ridge building?
Yeah, there's just an ordinary ridge that comes and goes, and then there's the big super ridges that do lock in for a long period of time. Those years that we get the super ridges that are really intense, they get locked in, usually pretty unique situations. A lot of the drought years we've had here recently in the western part of Canada, was part of a blocking weather pattern. The year ahead looks a little less blocky for Canada, but more so maybe in the U.S. plains. So the top of the ridge will get wiped out once in a while, and that'll bring rain to the prairies, while the base of the ridge over the plains and western Corn Belt might cause more persistent dryness.
Hey, in the Midwest, dry August, back into the growing season, not great for soybeans, and we'll be asking questions about, does the corn have enough to get to the end?
Right. Right. Right now we're a little concerned about whether that would be the case on corn because of this drier bias that's already in Iowa and Nebraska and some neighboring states. There is a drought that's still underway. With the northwest flow, we're not getting good storm systems. Now, when we warm up here, probably in April, we'll get a couple of storms that will come along and bring some moisture, which will help the planting, but it's not going to fix the deep subsoil moisture deficits, and that sets the stage for drier bias later in the summer, maybe.
Is there a year? I love these. I love asking. Is there a year that this reminds you of from our past?
Not anything that jumps off the charts, but there are a number of years that I'm looking at. Years like 1971, 2007, I believe 1989, and 1953. Those are all years that I'm looking at, and there's a 1968 thrown in there too. I know I'm just blowing these years.
53, a good year. My parents were born in 53. Was it a good year for crops?
In Canada, it was wet. It was pretty wet, especially in the spring, and the U.S. had a drier bias, and that's why 53 kind of looks a little bit interesting right now. It wasn't just crazy wet all the way through the prairies all summer long, but it was a wetter year, and I tend to not want to go fully with 1953, but a piece of it, a flavor of it, might come with us.
And that's an important caveat, is that those are like guidelines. There's a potential for the setup for those years to be similar to this year, but don't take it as like the gospel in terms of it rained on the June 15th of 53, so therefore it will in 2025.
Yeah, you don't want to do that.
Yeah.
These are just guidances. We look for something, weather does repeat itself, but doesn't get the specifics.
Yeah.
So.
To wrap up, what's the piece that you're the most interested in following this year? As
Two
you look
things.
Ahead? Okay. Number
one, this weak La Nina, it absolutely has to go away, and it looks like it will. It looks like it'll be gone by the time we get into the end of March. And we're already seeing it weaken, so I think that's going to be okay. The other thing is the negative phase of Pacific Decadal Oscillation, which has to do with cool water off the west coast of North America and then much warmer water further west. And in that scenario, we talked about the ridge possibly building up in the middle of North America. That promotes ridginess in the middle of North America in some years, especially years where La Nina sticks around. So if La Nina doesn't go away and we keep this negative PDO in place, the potential for getting a hot, dry scenario in the middle of North America becomes much higher. But I think we're going to lose La Nina. And we're going to get a part of this, but it's not going to be the big bad disaster, I hope, that we've seen in the past. But that's what I'm watching most closely right now.
Drew, if somebody wants some information on your newsletter, pitch it. Let's hear about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Go to our website, www.worldweather.cc. Be careful not to go to .com. There is no .com for this me.
Those imposters.
.cc. Yes, imposters. Or you can call us at 913-2, you can call my my office number, 913-383-1161. Too many phone numbers, sorry.
Drew, thanks a lot for joining us here. Enjoy the rest of Top Producer.
You too. Take care.
So for Western Canada, not the worst forecast there from Drew Lerner of World Weather Inc. It sounds like we got a chance. That's a little bit more encouraging than some of the other forecasts that I have heard, where we're potentially going to get off to a really good start and the tap is going to shut off very quick, and where there's a lot of concern in places like the Midwest, and we've experienced this in Western Canada. It's the heat. The heat is a big question. You can be a little bit on the dry side, but if it comes with stifling heat, that's a problem. So really appreciate you, Lerner, joining us. And if you are not a subscriber, encourage you to be. We've got more coming up here on RealAg on the Weekend, here on 650 CQM and 980 CGME right after this. RealAg Radio is Canada's only daily radio show focused on agriculture. Get expert advice on Agronomic Monday. Tuesdays and Wednesdays will cover a broad range of issues. Thursday we'll hear from farmers across the country on the Farmer Rapid Fire. And we'll wrap things up Fridays with the RealAg Issues panel with Kelvin Hefner and Lindsay Smith. Join us Monday through Friday at 4:30 Eastern. And don't forget about the replay at 7 in the morning on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Get all the information you need to keep your pulse crop healthy and profitable with the Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com. The Pulse School is a free YouTube video series covering agronomy, research, and more across a host of different pulse crops. It's also available as an audio podcast wherever you download or stream your favorite podcast. Check us out on YouTube,
or visit RealAgriculture.com, the Pulse School, brought to you by BSF Canada.
At the end of January, Crossroads Conference happened in Alberta. And one of the keynote speakers at that event was Michelle Payn. Now, I've known Michelle going back to like 2010. She speaks a lot about the advocacy side of agriculture. Her speech talked about the authentic stories and how they speak volumes. And Amber Bell of Real Agriculture had a chance to talk to Michelle after her keynote. Let's listen to what she had to say.
Okay, so your talk was pretty much on like how to tell our story as farmers. So do you want to kind of just mention a little bit about what you talked about this morning and what some of really those key things are when it comes to telling our story?
Sure. So we really talked about being able to grow your voice and feed your voice as a farmer, as anyone in agriculture. The power of an authentic story was at the essence of my message, and being able to embrace some of the new tools to be able to tell your story more effectively, such as regenerative AI, such as having an open mind when you're talking with people that are different than you, and then seeking out some of the issues that are impacting agriculture down the road proactively rather than just reacting to them.
Right, so let's hit that first point right first. Regenerative AI, can you speak into that? What is that for growers that don't know?
So ChatGPT, Perplexity, or some of the aggregators of the regenerative AI, such as, I can't even think of the one that I'm using, but there's a number of tools that came out. Of course, the one from China that just came out, I know nothing about that one because I'm not going to use it. But we all know regenerative AI is here to stay. Mm-hmm. So the question is rather than being scared of it, how can we use it to our power? So the way that I use regenerative AI is as my intern, more or less. So I try to approach her, and mine is a her, from a friendly basis, and to utilize her for research in particular. It's an incredible aggregator of information. For example, I've been doing some strategic planning work, and it does an amazing job of pulling together information from focus groups and research and coming up with common themes and strategies. But it also is an amazing tool that we can use in agriculture to be able to role play and ways to talk with consumers. There are actually ways that you can get your computer to talk to you as though it's a consumer and you're a farmer if you want to practice. But more importantly, what I showcased today was really what the sentiment was around Canadian farmers, and found some information about seed oils and information about canola and so forth through Perplexity.
Agriculture is a really interesting industry. We have everything from large-scale corporations to the farmer that is working their land that may or may not even have a computer. So where does that telling your story point hit home, especially when we're talking about things like AI? Like, when do you think is the right time for a producer to go and tell their story?
Now.
No, yeah.
The challenge that we have in agriculture is we're late in telling our story because we've allowed others to tell our stories for generations now, and we're dealing with the consequences. When you look at GMOs, you look at sustainability, you look at animal welfare, you look at the raw milk debate in the states that I'm undergoing, it's been crazy. So now is the time to tell the story, and it doesn't matter whether you're large or small, male or female, it doesn't matter if you're in the States or Canada. Your story is the best thing that you can tell to be able to shape the conversation around agriculture. And one of the questions that I answered today was around, well, where do I need to do this? Mm-hmm. Well, the where is simple. You figure out where you can be most effective and that you're passionate about. For me, it's working with dietitians and making sure that they understand as food influencers how food is actually produced, what goes into canola production, what goes into raising animals and so forth. For others, it may be elected officials. For some, it may be going into the schools. So really it's about being able to identify where you can best tell that story, but everyone has a story in agriculture, and so few of us understand that we are the experts in a way that no one else is. I think we have massive imposter syndrome within agriculture, and we need to stand up and more effectively share with people why we do what we do.
Right, and so for those growers, I think one thing that I heard from you this morning that was really impactful for me was quite often growers feel like, you know what, but I don't know all the science behind this, right? You made the comments about them being experts on their own farms.
Yes.
So if someone is looking to use a platform, let's say social media, they're going to go out on X, what type of stories should they be telling?
So social media is different for everyone. You need to know what your policies are in order so you know what you're going to tolerate there. And I cited a couple of great examples. John Kwalichuk is one that does an amazing job in sharing videos. And he goes out there during planting, during harvest, during the summer, and he just has a conversation with people. That's all we need to do is have a conversation. So whether you're on Insta and you're sharing reels, Leslie is another one who started Do More Ag, and she's high heels in canola fields, and she does an amazing job as well. And it's just about sharing everyday life, because really at the end of the day, whether you're on social or whether you're in person or whether you're trying to push information into the AI monsters, it's about sharing your story as a human first. Mm-hmm. As a human first, I will repeat that, not as a farmer, because humans relate to humans. And that's why our authentic story will drive more success than any glossy, polished expert researcher, blah, blah, blah. Just share your story. It's not that complicated.
I love it. And do you have any words of encouragement for producers that are watching this and thinking, man, I want to get out there, but I don't know where to start?
Yes. So start with somebody who makes you really uncomfortable. That's the best place to start. And don't scare yourself. But sometimes, honestly, it's a conversation with an extended family member at your next family gathering. Sometimes it's your next door neighbor. Sometimes it's going out wherever you get coffee and having a conversation with those people. For me, I like to reach all the way across the plate as far as I can, because A, curiosity. I want to know what other people are thinking, but B, the further you reach, the higher the impact you'll have.
Right. Well, that is incredible. I want to thank you so much for your time. And that was Michelle Payn on Real Agriculture.
That's Michelle Payn speaking at Crossroads there at the end of January, speaking with Real Agriculture's Amber Bell. Really appreciate Michelle giving us that interview. A lot of nuggets there, some tidbits in terms of telling our story from an agriculture perspective. Stay curious, right? There's lots of good stuff in there. I think it's also important. A lot of times when we talk about this inside of agriculture, and I say this because there's a pretty significant urban audience listening here on 650 CQM and 980 CGME as well. It should be a two-way conversation. Just don't be if you're a farmer trying to tell, we use that word tell our story, don't be scared to ask questions of people outside of agriculture as well. You're not lecturing. You're not giving a dissertation. It should be a conversation. And stay curious about what the consumer thinks as well, so that we're not, sort of pretending like we're all knowing about this, because the consumer's complex. Like, we have a lot of diversity in agriculture in terms of, the sizes of farm, types of farms, products that are being produced. But the consumer's a very diverse entity as well. It's not just this one thing that we're growing all these crops and producing all this livestock for. They have different demands. They have different needs. They have different wants. They have different tastes. And so we need to understand that as best as we possibly can as well. We've got more coming up here on Real Ag on the Weekend. You're listening to 650 CQM and 980 CGME. We'll be back right after this.
I'm Lindsay Smith from RealAgriculture.com. Join me Monday nights for The Agronomists, a 1-hour live and interactive show broadcast across YouTube, Facebook, and X. Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, I host expert agronomists from all over the country to give you answers to some of the toughest agronomic questions. Join us live or catch the replay Tuesday morning. That's The Agronomist with me, Lindsay Smith, Monday nights live at 8 p.m. Eastern.
The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com is your one-stop shop for everything a canola grower needs. Check out our free video series on YouTube for all the latest in canola agronomy, research, marketing, and more. Don't have time to watch? Download the podcast version of the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com or anywhere you download your podcasts. Stay on top of all things canola with the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com, brought to you by BASF and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
Some good news as of late. We're going to have a product we haven't been able to use on the prairies is back. Yeah, it's back, baby. It's just like the Terminator, lambda-cy. And recently at Crop Connect, that happened last week in Manitoba, in Winnipeg, Kelvin Hepner was on location, and he talked about this issue of lambda-cy coming back onto the market for Western Canadian farmers. He chatted about it with Ian Epp of the Canola Council of Canada. Here's our conversation.
Just last week, we received news that lambda-cy, the insecticide that was taken off of the list of products that was okay to use here in Canada a couple of years ago, is going to be allowed for the 2025 growing season. Can you fill us in on what this means and what has happened here?
Yeah, from a grower perspective, I guguess the previous uses of lambda-cy, how it's registered in canola, we're back to where we were before. So for a grower that has used the product before, you can use it as per those labels. Again, staying on labels is really important, but your ability to use it for the 2025 growing season should be before this decision came out. So I guess back to status quo.
Okay, so the tool is back in the toolbox, so
yes.
to say. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Available for growers, and the registered uses, the use pattern, everything is the same. Just, again, maybe brush up on the label, but follow it as like it's in the crop protection guide.
Okay. Can you fill us in on the process behind the scenes, what happened here with the Pest Management Regulatory Agency, PMRA, in terms of the process, why it was taken off and now why it's back?
Yeah, so it was taken off a couple years ago, and it was not an issue in canola. But again, with a wide stroke, they took it off. They looked at feed versus use and versus food. And for us in the canola industry, that was kind of a new looking at it. The PMRA, a different angle on what is feed and what is food. And there was a lot of uncertainty around that. So again, we had some data that was then submitted to the PMRA. Part of that is just it's a process for them to go through the data, to review it, to fill in those gaps, and to determine is this an issue or not. It took longer than we would like, obviously, to lose the tool for a couple years, but they've reviewed it, and similar to other markets, they've determined this is not a risk in canola. So, I mean, this is a good news story for canola, for growers, that, a science-based decision and something that we can use a tool that is, really key for growers.
Okay. So it took some time, and this product was off the market for, what was it, 2 growing seasons?
I believe so, yeah.
But in the end, Canada's scientific process still held up, we could say, through this process?
Yeah, I would say so. There's always, there's red tape, there's a slow process. It doesn't work as fast as you would like as a grower or as an industry, but they looked at new data, they reevaluated the decision based on new data, and I think the outcome of that decision is science-based and beneficial to growers and to the industry in general.
Okay, and so that maybe gives us confidence that if this type of thing happens again in the future, the science will, it's not that this was a deviation from the scientific process in the end.
No, I think this was a good outcome for us. I think it is a science-based outcome. We've seen this in other markets. Other regulatory bodies have come to a similar conclusion. From an industry perspective, it'd be nice to be able to generate data or move a little quicker to fill these gaps. So we're always looking from a canola perspective or an industry perspective, what's coming down the pipeline? How do we get ahead of this? Is there a data gap? It'd be nice to have more clarity on that, but this is the outcome we were looking for.
Okay. What does this mean in terms of insect management? Where is this relevant, I guess, in a canola rotation? Growers will know this, but in terms of familiarity with this issue?
Yeah, so it's another tool in the toolbox. And the interesting with insecticides, there's a number of ones that are all registered on similar pests. And some of them are somewhat interchangeable. Flea beetles are our number one pest in canola. We know that there will be, if we look at any insecticide application, flea beetles is the number one every year. I don't know which field's going to be affected, but flea beetles are always our number one insect pest. And then if we do have other issues, some late season ones that, your Diamondbacks or your Bertha, some of these that kind of pop up, that's where we might have a bit of a, if we do have a bigger year, it's nice to have an extra tool in the toolbox, should those ones pop up. But flea beetles are the biggest application just because they're our biggest pest year after year.
All right. Finally, then, Ian, as we look ahead to the 2025 growing season, there's the Keep It Clean campaign that the Canola Council is, of course, part of, and it's all about keeping residue levels in Canada's crops below what they need to be in terms of export risk and marketability. What do we need to have on our radar as producers, as agronomists, heading into the 25 growing season when it comes to canola?
Yeah, from a canola perspective, we're in pretty good shape where it's going to be very similar to last year. We have a product advisory that comes out from the Keep It Clean program looking at specific products that are of concern, or maybe they're registered in Canada, but maybe there's an export export market that's not accepting them. We're once again really happy in canola to not have any products on that advisory. There's still, watch out for growers that certain products are under scrutiny. There's still testing happening. But if you follow a product that's labeled, make sure it's labeled, used in canola. And if you follow that label as far as dose, timing, all of those things, you should be good from an export perspective when you go to sell that grain.
Okay. There's the old malathion in storage still?
Yeah, that one still kicks around. That malathion, if you're storing, if you're cleaning your bins in this summer and prepping for the canola crop, don't use malathion in the grain bins. I mean, it's been a number of years since this is a problem, but again, nothing has changed. We don't have an MRL in place, so it's still, I guess it could be a concern. It hasn't been a big problem for I think it's mostly growers just reminding themselves that if you do have an insect problem or a bin cleaning out problem, malathion is not good for bins that are destined for canola.
All right. Thanks for your time, Ian.
Yeah, thank you.
Finish off today's show, what I thought I'd do is play for you a piece of a conversation that I had with Josh Linville of StoneX. Josh is a great fertilizer analyst. He was actually the closing keynote speaker at the Top Producer Summit. And we talked about the direction of fertilizer prices. Not a good news story for farmers that are having to buy these products. Let's hear what he had to say.
Farmers are obviously concerned about input price. We've seen the commodity prices start to come up a little bit, but with that also, I think there's some concerns that fertilizer markets are kind of in that same direction.
Well, and actually, the fertilizer market's front-loaded this thing. It's been a little bit more of the fertilizer leading the way. Grains have been finally following a little bit higher to help offset some of those price increases. But, yeah, a lot of global events have continued to happen here over the fertilizer year, and now the market's finally started to realize it. There's a big difference from the conscience of the marketplace shifting from one calendar year to the next. You know, you go through Christmas, you go through New Year's. Spring is a long way away. You get to the new year, which we're now there. Spring is right around the corner, and that's what we're experiencing now, and prices are starting to reflect that.
Like, why does this keep happening? What are the fundamentals of the fertilizer market? Is it because of the corn acres going to be? We're going to plant more corn this year in the Midwest, and that's just pulling everything higher?
It's part of it.
Okay.
And that is obviously a part of it. When you start out the new year, we started at 92 million acres of corn. Before the family and I went down to Disney World, it was 92 and a half. We moved it up a little bit, felt good about it. I wasn't gone a week, and we jumped to 93 and a half, and you started to hear people talk 94, 95, 96. That's a tremendous amount of nitrogen, phosphate, potash demand that we weren't expecting with a lot of time to prepare for the springtime. So that's one side of it, but we've already been dealing with a lot of problems globally. Nitrogen, Chinese exports of urea still aren't happening. European production is still 75% of normal. One that we didn't see coming, Iranian urea production is offline. They export about 4.8 million ton per year. So things have gotten very snug on the nitrogen side. Phosphate, China's still only about 6.6 million tons exported versus 10 million normal. Potash is really the only one that has dropped down, well supplied, etc. But even it's starting to see some appreciation over the last few weeks between tariff fears and demand growing.
But yeah, why would potash be soft?
It's well supplied. When you look at it globally, there's more than enough to go around, and there's more production coming online. You've got some I'll speak about here shortly. You've got Laos production continues to build with Chinese investments. Russia's producing more. Canada will be producing more.
BHP's going to BHP.
Yeah. So yeah, there's enough to go around, and a very well supplied market really doesn't have a lot of need to go up longer term. Now, in a situation like this where the price was historically low, it was low versus grain values, you had the tariff fears, there's a lot of reason to push that price up, but we think it's short term. After we get through pre-plant, we should see that calm down again.
How is the anticipation of tariffs and what that's going to look like? How is that impacting the market?
So February 1, it was a very, very big worry point because we're right in the thick of trying to move stuff across the borders. Both sides, farmers on Canadian and U.S. side, were going to be impacted by this.
That's a portion of my conversation with Josh Linville of StoneX. Highly encourage you to go to RealAgriculture.com and listen to that full interview from the Top Producer Summit. It's been a lot of fun here today on Real Ag on the weekend. I encourage you to send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com, and make sure you subscribe to our e-newsletters by going to realagriculture.com/subscribe. Thanks, everybody, for getting real and getting connected with Real Ag on the weekend here on 650 CQM and 980 CJB.